The following is a live broadcast of a Lone Star community radio program, recorded and broadcasted live on irlonestar.com, Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1, and facebook.com/irlonestar. For more information on this show, please visit our show page at irlonestar.com/shows. To sponsor or donate to this program, visit our donate page at irlonestar.com/donate, or email us at lscrstudios@gmail.com, or give us a call at 936-666-1084. Lone Star Community Radio production and broadcast is possible by folks like you. So sponsor and donate today.
You're listening to Lone Star Community Radio on 104.5 KCZW LP Conroe and 106.1 KZCC LP Conroe, and worldwide on irlonestar.com.
Friday, 1 to 2 p.m. And, every Friday is a little different. And sometimes we are very adaptable. So that's one of the things we do in Extension. We adapt and we meet the needs of Texans wherever they are and whatever they have and they need to do. So this Extension hour is a little different because we are doing it by Zoom. So one of the reasons why it looks a little different here today, but I'm really excited about what we have here to talk about today. So in Extension, we have a group that's called Coming Together for Racial Understanding, and it's all about helping facilitate conversations, difficult conversations. So we're going to have some probably difficult conversations today. And so I'm kind of rambling. I want to talk a little more. I want to introduce my guest to start with. So we have Dr. Sonja Davis, who has actually been on the show before. She is my cohort in Harris County. So Sonja, you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Sonja Davis, County Extension Agent, Family Community Health in Harris County. And I am very passionate about health and wellness, so my career suits me well.
Yes. And so, Sonja, you've worked for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension for 15 years? Somewhere around there?
No, actually, I've been with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension for about almost 12 years. Mm-hmm. And previously, I was with Prairie View A&M University's Cooperative Extension Program for 12 years. So a lot of years in Extension.
Yeah. So Prairie View Cooperative Extension, we have with us Don Burton, who is a health specialist with Prairie View A&M. So Don, would you introduce yourself? And then we're going to come back around, and I want you to tell us a little bit more about Prairie View after we introduce Craig.
Absolutely. Good. Hello, everyone. My name is Dawn Burton, and I am the health specialist for Cooperative Extension, which is Prairie View's extension program. And I'm so excited to be here.
We are glad you are here as well. And Dr. Craig Rotter is with us, and he is the program director for Texas Rural Leadership Program. And I might have said that wrong, Craig, so you can correct me.
That's fine. Titles don't matter to me, especially on a Friday, Amy. Yeah. And so it's fantastic to be here today. I am with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service with our Texas Rural Leadership Program. We are the human capacity builders when it comes to looking at rural communities and counties and working with folks to step up their game and building a better future through creating positive change. And so it's great to be a part of this initiative, but it's also outstanding on this Friday to be with you today and our colleagues as we are here to talk about what we're doing with our current work group.
Yeah, so on the Extension Hour, we've talked often about how there's a lot of things in Extension that people have no idea. So in some cases, just like have no idea that Extension exists, or they only know kind of that little part that they participate in, which, usually for them is a pretty big part, but they, that's the people that the gardening stuff, or, the 4-H program, but they're like so much more to Extension. And I think the Texas Rural Leadership Program is one of those ones that people don't even know that we have. So, hey, Craig, at some point we should do a show just about the Texas Rural Leadership Program.
that would be fantastic.
Yeah. So what we're talking about today, though, is our Coming Together for Racial Understanding group. So an interesting thing about Extension, we call them kind of a sister organization, Prairie View Cooperative Extension Program, which Dawn currently works for, Sanja had worked for in the past, but they're sister organizations. But so before we get too much further into the conversation, Dawn, tell us a little bit about Prairie View.
So Prairie View is a historically Black university, and it is a land-grant institution just like Texas A&M. And so we are federally funded to do outreach in the community. And so that's the group or the organization of Cooperative Extension. And so we have four main entities. It's Family and Community Health. It is 4-H and Youth Development, Ag and Natural Resources, and 4-H Youth Development. Did I say all four? Going too fast.
Community and economic development.
Thank you. Community and economic development. It is a Friday.
It's a team effort here.
Team effort. I love my team. And so we work with the communities who are underprivileged or who need a lot of assistance for whatever reason, and we meet them where their needs are, and we provide resources, informal education to them. We typically we are in the communities, and so we try and partner with existing organizations and churches and provide the information.
And so the core of what you do at Prairie View Cooperative Extension is same as the core of what we do with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension is helping Texans better their lives. It's all about that, and we just do that in similar ways. There are kind of a little bit different in terms of the audiences that we're working towards and that kind of thing. But really, it's research-based education, helping Texans better their lives. Sanja, did you want to add anything to that based on your experience and the similarities and differences between the two?
Well, I think when Don mentioned partners, I would like to say in Harris County, we attempt to partner whenever we can on different programs and opportunities. So we're sister agencies and also partners at the same time.
Exactly. Okay, so Coming Together for Racial Understanding. Let's do just a little bit of background about that. Sanja and Don, you both were involved in the initial effort that was a nationwide effort to address this, correct?
Yes. We were a team of four or 3 plus 1. Dr. Carolyn Williams, who is the Executive Associate Director of the Cooperative Extension Program at Prairie View, is a part of the National Extension organization. And they had the foresight in 2016 to know that these social injustice issues that are going on they are something that Cooperative Extension has the capability to address. Because we as cooperative extension agencies have always taken the lead in addressing the difficult issues and being the trusted resource that the community can rely on. And so they did an entire process they charged a task force to study the issue and determine, what was the true ability and could we really handle this major issue and topic. And the task force came back with a resounding yes. And so from there, the effort was put in place. Experts within Extension and outside of Extension were brought together to develop curriculum and training materials. And then we were lucky enough to be volunteered and voluntold and enjoy the process of going through the training back in 2018.
And then the training is really to help facilitate community conversations around race. And
Yes.
Several of us, so you guys participated at the national level, and then Texas Extension chose to implement one here in Texas. And so there's a cohort of agents and specialists across the state who participated in that training. So we're ready, willing, able, equipped to start facilitating conversations. But before we're gonna have a little bit of maybe an uncomfortable, difficult conversation as we talk today. But So Craig, let's start with you and tell me a little bit about like what is your interest in, how did you get involved in this group?
Yeah, thank you. For me, the interest came before I actually came into being employed by Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. I spent 17 years in student affairs at Texas A&M University in housing, and so we had a very intimate knowledge of our student population and the issues that happened after their classroom hours in our residence halls and around in the community. And so we were always at a heightened level of sensitivity in caring for our students and who they are as individuals. And that social justice undertone and the foundational piece has always been at my heart in my professional life, especially working there. And I brought that over to my work in working with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Services, Texas Rural Leadership Program. So the interest was there beforehand, but knowing that we're not where we could be in Texas and in our society and in this country, and then in particular, what we've witnessed this year, as so many issues have been brought to the forefront in our news cycles and in life, what we're doing is needed and necessary if we're going to really fulfill our promise. And so for me personally, it's part of who I am, and it's a part of what we do through TRLP, and it just makes good sense.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So Don, tell us a little bit, obviously you were part of that national group, but, what made you want to continue that?
To live some of the experiences that people are learning about, as well as to want to change for my children, is really what motivates me and drives me, because it was so interesting because when Tiana, short story, Tiana, the Disney princess, when it came out, I was so excited. The first Black princess. Oh my goodness, wonderful. And my children grew up with it. So it was normal to them. So they didn't have the same amount of excitement that I had. And so, of course, as they got older, they were ready to redecorate their room and throw all of that out. And I was like, no, this is precious. This is special. And they were like, Mom, this is clutter, get rid of it. And it wasn't until the George Floyd situation that we started talking about that. And she said, I didn't get it. I didn't understand. I was a kid and I grew up, it was a part of my childhood. So she didn't have that reference point that I did, where it did not exist.
Right.
And so now her perspective is different, and she wishes that she would have kept maybe the blanket or the sheets or something. But it's just it's knowing that the world could be a better place for my children, and so that continuously pushes me to make sure that I do my part to make the change happen as much as possible.
Right. And Sonja, how about you? You want to share a little bit?
I think being at that training, it was a week long. We were there for a whole week, and the days were long. We would go to 8, 9 o'clock at night, and then you get to your room, and just hearing individuals share stories, you couldn't sleep. So I think just having the experience of other people's pain, I just never would want individuals to have that pain. And the things that we've seen this year with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, I think they're just conversations that we need to have. When you don't know people, you don't know their backgrounds, it makes a difference. So it's just about having those conversations. And I felt when I attended the training, I actually felt guilty. I felt guilty that I never had those experiences that other people in the other states had. And I'll never forget, if you don't mind, I tell this story. There was a gentleman, I can't remember, I think he was from South Carolina or Mississippi, but he shared this story and it stayed with me about he worked on campus, and a white coworker, she couldn't understand why every time he passed by her, he would put his head down. And just having a conversation at that meeting, he shared with her that he had always been taught to never look a white lady in her face. And so it's these barriers, these things that we've grown up with, never had a conversation about. It's just time to start, dismantling those barriers and just having open conversations so that the next generation will be better.
Yeah. And then, so that's actually a very nice segue into what we wanted to talk about. So, difficult conversations, uncomfortable conversations, just conversations, and particularly around race and in between, or, interracial conversations can be interesting and different. And sometimes we can cause pain without even really intending to do that. So, kind of what we wanted to focus on, in our time together today on this Extension Hour show is called Flip the Script. So there is a lot of research out about the words we use and how they affect other people. And so this is particularly with Flip the Script, race and ethnicity. And we're using as a guide a handout that was put out by catalyst.org. But it just kind of goes through some phrases that we say to people, to each other, and kind of how that could impact people that maybe we don't realize to begin with. And I will say this, from perspective of a white person. So sometimes conversations that I have with people of a different color or race, it may not resonate with me. And I can tell you, so just personally too, progress that I've made throughout the years has helped me see things differently. So kind of changed my perspective on things. And so just the kind of conversations that we have, and sometimes the things we say, and I think back sometimes of things that I have said and now regret saying that because I didn't realize the impact that those kinds of things could have had as I said those, because a lot of the things that we say sometimes, we think is polite. Like, so just for instance, we'll start with the first one we want to talk about is, a lot of people will say, well, we don't see people of color. We don't notice people's colors. I'm colorblind. That's a phrase that's used a lot, which, from one perspective sounds like I'm being very polite, right? We should be colorblind. And I've seen some information, some research that suggests that maybe that comes from the speech from Martin Luther King, where he says that people are not judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. But really, and that's understandable. But really, when you don't see color, okay. So, Craig, have you ever said that to anybody? I'm gonna put you on the spot. I've said that before. And so I will admit to that. And now I realize that maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. So I'm going to ask Craig, and then I'm going to ask Sanja and Dawn about if you've ever heard that and how you felt about that. Craig, you want to share?
Yeah, your question was, have I ever said it? That I don't know, but I have certainly heard it enough in any circle I've been in. The wrestling, and again, as a white male in Texas, is to be conscious of where you're sitting in what you're expressing, and to anybody that you're having a conversation with, and being yourself. And there are some ouch moments in our awareness. I've gone through that, maybe not particularly with this line, but at times where I've said something and then I thought for a second, that didn't quite come out right, or didn't quite come out how I was trying to express myself. And being open and comfortable with that. But for this particular statement, to say that you don't see it, in my evolution, again, as a white male in Texas and from a rural community, a very small place, to not see people's color is strange, and not acknowledging, what you see, because what you see is what is there in terms of skin tone is an interesting thing. And so getting to the deeper part of that may take longer than the moment you have with a person. Right. And yet wrestling with some of your own experiences and wrestling with some of the things you've witnessed, again, in my case, as a white male coming from a small town, is what we should be doing every day, and wrestling with our own thoughts and how we've been programmed and what we've been culturally been programmed to see as acceptable. And at times, most definitely still fall victim to some behaviors that we don't like in ourselves.
Right. So Sanja, when I say to you, I don't see color, what does that say to you?
I don't think I've ever heard the statement made to me, but I think if a person says that, I mean, you're just being dishonest. How can you not? When you use a crayon box, you select the color you want. So for a person to say that they don't see color, I just think that's a untrue statement. And for you, Amy, when you know better, you do better. So don't beat yourself up about that. We're all growing.
Yeah. So how about you, Don? Do you have some thoughts on that
Yes,
comment?
I was in a training, and it was a training on differences, not specifically race and ethnicity, but just differences in general. And it came up, and there was a white lady who said exactly that. Well, I grew up not seeing. My parents taught me not to see color, and I was so triggered because it's like everything in life is based in race, right? When you fill out an application, you have to identify your race. When they give the news reports, they say, oh, well, the black person did this, or, I mean, race is so prevalent in all levels of life. And then to see me and see that I am clearly black, and then to say you don't see color, it's like, well, how does that work? That's a little difficult. And so it was challenging. And honest to the power of conversations, we had dialogue and talked about it, and she understood, and she never thought of it that way. And I wasn't offended from the standpoint of, I don't think she had malice behind what she said, but I heard her level of not knowing, and got triggered because it is offensive, because like I said, everything in life in some way, shape, or form goes back to race. And so for you to make that statement, it's difficult, but I'm happy that we were able to have the conversation, and you could see the light bulb moment. We're like, oh, you're right. I'm so, and so it was fine. And like Sonia said, when you know better, you do better. And so I listen, I hear things like that, but I listen for the malice. And so it's typically not it's offensive, but it's not a big problem if there's no malice.
Right, right.
When there's malice involved, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Exactly. And I think by and far most people who say that, like I said, really intend it to be a polite statement. But the research actually shows that the impact of that, when you ignore differences, you stifle trust, you cut off that authentic conversation or that communication that can happen, and then your ability to connect with someone who is different from you, it makes it much more difficult to do that. So just either if we're the one that is saying that or the one that is hearing that, have just being open to the conversation and where it can go from there is very helpful. So I'll share just a little story about the crayon box that you mentioned. Sanja made me think of this. So family that I'm very close to, love very much, was visiting, and the little girl's in kindergarten, and she was asked to draw a picture of her family, and I was very honored that she wanted me to be part of her family. So she's got her crayons out, and she just gets she's kindergarten, first grade, so probably about 6 years old, gets this kind of puzzled look on her face, and she looks at me, and she looks at her paper and looks at her crayons, and then she says, "What color are you?" So I said, "What color do you think I am?" She thought for a second, and then she said, "Pink. I'm going to use pink." Okay, let's use pink. But instead of saying, "Oh, no, we're all the same color. We don't see color. Let's talk about our differences." Because the research says that it's not racist to see a person's race or ethnicity. So somehow we've gotten the idea that it is, seeing color is rude, and then that is racist. But it's really kind of the opposite, that you acknowledge and you honor the race and the experience of people that are different from you.
Amy,
Yes.
I want to go back to Dawn. So Dawn said she was triggered, but she didn't allow it to, her response wasn't negative, because we also have to remember our responses can also shut down the conversation. I think that's important. So, it's important to have conversations, but we have to make sure that we don't react in a way that, shuts it down also.
Right. So what can I say instead? What do we do instead? What are some
Well, Dawn in her example, she had a conversation. She, shared her experiences with the lady so that, she knew why she felt that way. And I think that's important that just to be, just to be honest, there's this stigma with the angry Black woman. So I think sometimes they may be afraid to say things to us because they feel like they don't know the response that we're going to get. But that's not every Black woman. That's stereotyping. So we keep using the word authentic. If we are authentic in our responses, then people know where we're coming from. It's not a place of hate or to get back at you, but just clearly trying to open conversations and have those discussions, why we feel that way, why they felt that way. And that's the only way that we're going to move forward.
Yeah.
And to your question, Amy, there's not a standard answer for all of the difficult questions. And some of the catchphrases or some of the statements that are offensive, there's not a standard reply that will work in every situation. Because just like I was triggered, but was able to stay calm and talk her through that, someone else could have been seriously triggered and completely gone left and been the total angry Black woman, and and reinforce and seriously and authentically reinforce the stereotype. So I think it's important to realize that it is a difficult conversation, and as much as it's a difficult conversation, know that it's okay to make mistakes, but be willing to hear that you made a mistake. I think the problem is when you make a mistake and someone tries to point it out and say, well, maybe that's not the right way to think about that. And as opposed to being defensive or shutting down, being open and receptive to hearing what they're saying, and then allowing the conversation to move forward in that way.
Exactly. Yes. And Craig, is there anything you would like to add to this?
Yeah, I like the words that you used in terms of authentic communication. I also look at that from the standpoint of having authentic relationships in work and in anywhere really that we're working and communicating and building time with other people. But for me, I think with this one in particular and thinking through this, it's really looking to see whether people can truly be themselves. And again, what I said earlier, the ouch moments and those moments where you said something wrong, if you have an authentic and solid relationship, you can learn. I think the greater issue is when people continue the behaviors or just flat aren't aware. I don't like using the word ignorance because of its negative connotativity. I prefer to use the word naive, and that sometimes folks just haven't had the experiences enough. And what Don said in terms of whether there was malice in the intent, to me is a deeper piece because there's a lot of innocence in our behaviors of not knowing. And it's once you are aware, that consciousness, once you are, the hope would be that people wouldn't be doing that anymore, and possibly even not necessarily correcting, but at least finding ways to navigate teaching other folks that there's a better way. So intent and impact, we used to call it intent versus impact, that somebody's intent may not totally come out, but the impact may be greater than they could have ever imagined, positive or negative, in this case, negative. So I like to say intent and impact in thinking through that the person's intent, if we can really examine that, perhaps they will have a better sense of what kind of impact they had, especially when it's not the reaction they thought or just had literally no clue.
Yes. Okay, so kind of related to this, so we're talking about seeing color and genuine conversations. And Sanjay, you mentioned sometimes reactions in certain ways that could make someone, could reinforce a stereotype. So another thing that is said to people sometimes is, "You were so articulate," which sounds like a compliment, right? You were so articulate. But what does that really say to someone, particularly if it's someone of a different color or someone that you might have a particular stereotype about or stereotype idea about them?
Well, I would probably say, well, what do you mean by that? But it's almost implying that they had lower expectations or, because of my race that I could not speak or form a complete sentence. So it's insulting. It's definitely insulting.
Don, you want to share anything related to that?
Sonia covered it well, because there are those caveats that it's like, well, thank you, but what, why, why wouldn't I be articulate? And
What did you expect?
what did you expect? Or you look nice today. Today, do I not typically look nice? I mean,
It's a good day.
what are you trying to say?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So the research with that says, it does reinforce a stereotype that people of color or ethnic minorities are less than competent than, say, their white counterparts, and that those that are successful are like an exception to the rule. Craig, what did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say it's also again educating ourselves and instead of using the they and really approaching the we and who we are in particular in our whiteness and being white folks and again not living the experiences of other folks and maybe again not having a clue as to what we were trying to say versus what we meant versus what we actually said in the that moment of, oh my God, did you just say that? Or really in that moment and that pause. But the point with this one, we're saying you're so articulate, or you said that so well, or wow, what you wrote was so good. It's that second layer within that language and the stereotypes and the stereotyping that goes into that. Again, like Don said, what would you expect? Would you not expect this from me as your colleague or as somebody you know? And that pause and in that moment is so critical. And when these things happen again, what's our relationship after the fact?
Yeah.
Can we recover from that moment of that ouch, or is it so deep and so painful that in the embarrassment of being caught in a moment that you had no clue as a white person and owning that, I think is fascinating. But it's where we go together from that point forward that I think proves our authenticity and who we are.
Right. So what can we do instead?
Reframe your language, pause and think about it and ask yourself, okay, if I literally stop for a second and say, if I'm going to say something to an individual, how could it be interpreted or misinterpreted, or what would be the outcome? And working to really, as best you can't ever put yourself in someone else's shoes, but how close could you get to looking at that and saying, what would be something that would be similar that somebody would say to me and my identities? And again, culturally, the likelihood of that is lower and less that somebody would say that to somebody, because we're again, it's so ingrained in who we are that we don't even realize it's happening. So to me, just being very conscious of if you're going to say something and try to be positive, why are you saying it to this person, but yet you wouldn't necessarily say it to another person?
Right. And maybe focus more on the content of what was said. So your presentation was very motivating, or this conversation was very, very stimulating. I like what you said about this topic instead of just
praise the person for the work they did instead of commenting so deeply and directly as to their articulation or again kind of a comparison of good versus bad in it.
Okay. So another one that's similar is what we've talked about so far is kind of black and white because if you haven't noticed, Craig and I are white. Sanja and Don are black, but we all speak English. But sometimes we even are, with race and ethnicity, we may say, oh, she speaks English very well. And it's kind of related to that articulation, but, that impact insinuates that the racial or ethnic minorities are outsiders who can't speak English and don't really belong here. And, people of all, the research actually says people of all races and ethnicities can speak English well, and even those of us who have always spoken English, some of us speak it a little better than others. There's all kinds of accents and colloquialisms and not being able to say words correctly sometimes that can affect all of us. So you guys have thoughts on that?
Well, this is Sanja, and I get this one. I see this one a lot. She speaks English well, but it's not so much directed at me, but maybe individuals, Hispanics or other races. But I mean, I want to just sometimes my coworkers have to stop me and just say, okay, what did you say? Because I get caught up speaking Arkansas. So I have to slow down. Okay, oh, let me. And even in my typing, sometimes I just wanted to interject that. But, I think it's like you said, everyone speaks English well, or they speak English enough, even if, you have an accent with it. But I think we just have to be respectful and patient with people. Like everybody's not from Arkansas. They're not going to have that Southern twang, but just work, be patient with me. It'll come out. You'll understand it.
Definitely. Dawn, do you want to add something?
Yes, and there's another layer of this that I want to highlight, and that's when talking to children. I've seen and heard people say something to the effect of one or both of these to children, and so I would just encourage people to, and children, they can also be affected in a negative way, because they have that same type of, wait, why wouldn't I speak English well, or why wouldn't I be articulate? And so I would encourage people to think about what they are complimenting and try to do a better job of being specific in their compliment. Like if a younger child is articulate, you say, instead of saying articulate, why do you think she's so articulate? Is it because she expresses herself so well for a younger child, which would be impressive? If you see a young child come up and can clearly express their feelings and their thoughts, then it's like, well, you're so mature for such a young person. And that can be received so much better than, you're so articulate. It's like, well, yeah, of course she's articulate, or yeah, she speaks English well. Well, so I would say, especially when it comes to children, because children are very sensitive and they pick up on those things very easily. And I would hate for a child to be bruised, their spirit bruised, or their self-esteem injured, because of a compliment that it was supposed to be a compliment, but it was received not so complimentary.
Right. One of the things that I've learned, or that I think of when I hear someone with an accent, particularly what we would consider a foreign accent, is they know a language that I don't know. And I have such admiration for people who have been able to learn another language. So that's one of those things that so whether it's language, or I always also try, speaking in terms of relating to other people, I always try to remember that everybody I meet knows something that I don't know, whatever it is. They've had different experiences, and there is something that I can learn from them.
Amy, I want to share too, just building a little bit and adding on to what Dawn said, that there's also the piece in terms of what our children pick up. Mm-hmm. And from our own behaviors that we may not realize, and how fast they do. I was watching, you talk about the ultimate white show. There was a show called Growing Pains when I was in high school that we watched, and it was about a white kind of upper middle class family. But there was an episode on just this week on a channel that shows old shows, and they had a child that had picked up a bad word that they were, that was 2 years old and was just saying it, and it was funny throughout the show. But the notion of how quickly a child could pick up these behaviors of treating someone as lesser, or when there's difference, when did we start noticing that, or acting as if being someone that is not in our own identities is lesser? Probably starts at a very early age. And so how do we do better by increasing that sensitivity in our households and what our children are picking up, or when you're starting to see that they're picking up, that noticing the differences of them and their fellow children in school, how early can we start having those conversations and moving them forward to widen their lens, possibly even wider than ours certainly was when we were young, but even where we might be today, because they're our future.
Yes. Yep. So there's a couple of others that we could talk about, but I think we've got about 10 minutes or so left, and this is a good time to talk about what can we do? What can we do differently? And Dawn, you mentioned a little bit about children, and Craig, you've just mentioned about children and the future and what we provide in the future. And so, thinking about not just the future, but now, what can we do now, and how can we make a better future? So some of the things that we can do if we want to flip the script on how we communicate and interact with each other. The first thing is pay attention. So let's just we'll do a little bit of a round robin. And Craig, I see you on the screen. So talk about what does pay attention mean to you?
To me, pay attention is increasing my own sensitivity. And again, I'm going to keep doing things until I know better. And how do I know better? Well, it's spending that quality time at any given moment of realizing and thinking through how could I do better in my relationships with folks, and especially with spending some time looking at my past in terms of my own identities and again, the way I was brought up, and how do I don't want to say break the cycle, but again, just how am I pausing and just being a lot more aware and creating some new habits, and again, breaking the notion of how quickly I can jump to stereotypes, because they have been the things that have been most often reinforced in media or in my life experiences, and they're not always true. And in today's time, because we've moved to a lot more folks that are biracial, multiracial in our relationships and who we are in our identities, recognizing that those stereotypes are probably going to be increasingly false. And you cannot jump to those and say, this is my truth, as our population in Texas and in the United States has become much more of a true mix of identities and who we are. So I would encourage the biggest thing, stop, figure out how I can be more sensitive and more aware, and then act on those notions and spend the time reflecting.
How about you, Don? What does pay attention mean to you?
I think that, to me, pay attention is a indication of being aware of yourself, where you are, understanding that if you are when things of race and racism comes up, understand it's an uncomfortable conversation. It's an uncomfortable situation. But if there's any way you can be somewhat comfortable with the discomfort and push through and understand, if you are sincerely trying to have a conversation or communicate, then paying attention means that you're listening. In addition to paying attention to yourself, you're listening to what the other person has to say. And although it might not come out well all the time, understanding that the other person has experiences that you could benefit from, and the discomfort of being in the situation can help you to grow. So I guess in summary, understanding that being in a situation talking about race and racism is very uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be a horrible situation. And if you're receptive and open to hearing what the other person has to say and listening, then you both can grow and create the authentic conversations and relationships that are needed. And so, I would love to say, hopefully it won't be so uncomfortable next time, but I'm almost sure it will be very uncomfortable next time. So that's why I have to say, there's definite discomfort, but when we understand that there's growth in the discomfort, if you're open and receptive to hearing, then it's not bad. Kind of like the rain, there's something. I've been doing some gardening since COVID, and as much as I water the plants, it's nothing like a good rain that just makes the plants stand up and grow and blossom and do so well. So, it's about leaning into the discomfort, but not stopping,
Right.
but going.
Yeah. So, Sandra, share with us your thoughts on paying attention.
I would go with Don with paying attention to people's their feelings. And if you just look in my family personally, if I just look at my family and how it looked 30 years ago, 40 years ago, as opposed to how it looks now, and even my coworkers, the people who I work with here in the office, the office, it doesn't look like it did maybe 5-10 years ago. So I want people here to feel like they belong, that we're a part of a team. I always try to strive for the team concept. And I don't want individuals to feel like they don't belong here because of their race. So I just think paying attention to, the words that are spoken, our reactions, our nonverbal, that plays a big part. So I just want people, just pay attention to how we react and just making sure that people feel like they belong.
Right. And so when talking about paying attention, a question you can ask yourself, are your words authentic? Are they thoughtful? Are they carefully chosen? yet at the same time not so stilted that they stifle the open conversation. You know, if you're being so careful and so worried about, you know, might offend somebody, but being open to, not just I'm sorry I offended you, but let me learn from this so that I don't do it again, so that we have healthier relationships going into the future.
And Amy, you want to ask questions when you don't understand. Ask questions. How did were you offended by the statement I made, or did I make you feel a certain way? And don't be afraid to ask questions. Like Don said, you have to have. It's going to hurt, but you grow from the hurt, and it's just having open conversations and not being able to ask a person. Sometimes we offend people and we don't even know it. We go on with our lives, and here they held a grudge when we could have just had a conversation about it.
Right. Which kind of leads to so there's three different things that on this flip the script things. Pay attention. The second one is learn from others. So if you're paying attention, you're going to see those learning opportunities as they come up. So Don, let's go back to you and talk a little bit about how you feel about learning from others, or what you can do, how you can learn from others.
I think it's important to learn from others. We have such varied experiences and histories that, just Sonia and I are both Black, but that doesn't mean that we've had the same experiences. And so it is important to have the conversations, and it is important to be able to learn from others. But the key to learning from others is to be able to listen, and to be able to listen and know that the person is more than likely not attacking you, but their vantage point is more personal. Because what I've noticed in these type of situations is when a Black person or a person of color talks about an experience that they've had or something negative that's happened, they're sharing a personal experience. But when a white person or a non-person of color is listening, they're listening with an ear they're listening with a personal ear, and the conversation is not being directed in a way that's saying you did this to me in some cases. Now, if it's a situation that happened, then that's different, but just in sharing experiences and past situations, there's a certain vantage point that two people can have that can completely throw off the conversation. Because if I'm talking to you about racist situations that have happened, I'm not blaming you. I am passionate about the situation. And so I want you to be able to hear me to understand. And you can learn from me in that situation. And so it's important to not be so sensitive and take it personal that I'm saying that you did this to me, or that you were a slave owner and this is all your fault. But just the standpoint that, this is real, this happens. And, if nothing else, acknowledge my feelings about the situation and not take it so personal. So it's important to listen and listen without taking things so personal. And if by chance you did offend somebody, then it's important to understand how and why you offended them so you won't do it again. Because we're human. I mean, we don't live this life without making mistakes. And so mistakes are a part of life. We make a mistake. The best thing you can do is apologize for it and then not do it again.
Right.
So it's a give and take situation.
Yeah. And so, Craig, I know you've been in lots of situations to learn from others. Can you share a little bit about what that means to you?
Yeah, and learn from my own mistakes as well. And I think to me, the biggest thing is, especially you think about a presidential election year, and the notion of where a number of our celebrities have stepped up for the sake of message, and that it's not a dishonor to our country to also recognize that a number of pieces of our history have been negative in how folks have been treated that are non-white through our history. And so to say that something has happened 100 years ago, this is one example of things that keep coming in my mind in terms of more recent experiences in 2020, that just because it hasn't been my experience doesn't mean that it's not real or that it's not occurring today. And so often, I think for me, the biggest thing isn't to pay attention, is obviously to care about individuals, which I think was mentioned and is fantastic. The second thing is to also figure out, hey, where am I in this mix of stepping up and having voice in this, even if it's not something that I've witnessed myself.
Yeah.
And so paying attention also means to be paying attention to history, paying attention to legacy, but also paying attention to what, like Dawn said, what somebody's trying to say, and clearly sharing it with you. And in that moment, get it in that moment. Don't lose it in that moment, and then figure out what can I do from here after hearing this from somebody that's in my life.
Right. And so paying attention and learn from others, an analogy that I think of, so, in this part of the country, right, we're worried about hurricanes that happen often. And, we think a hurricane's coming, we all brace for it, and maybe it doesn't hit us, but it hits Louisiana. So because it doesn't hit us, does that mean that their experience was not real, that it didn't hit them, that it wasn't a reality for them? So if I'm not paying attention and I'm not trying to learn from someone else's experience, it's easy for me to just think, oh, I haven't seen it, so it doesn't exist. It's not real because I haven't experienced it. But there's so everybody has a unique experience, which kind of leads us to the next one too, about be accountable. And be accountable, asking, can I count on your help to give me honest and constructive feedback? Which that could be kind of a difficult thing to ask, right? So, Craig, I still see you on the screen, and it can make us vulnerable to ask others about what, or Dawn. I mean, give me constructive feedback. Do I use my word? Are my words hurtful or offensive? Have I said something that's affected you? And I'm talking to anybody that you have a conversation with. So that's another one. So let's talk a little bit about the last one, the be accountable.
Well, being accountable is so vital and important, but at the same time, if you were not able to be authentic initially, then you're not going to be able to be in a space where you can where you can be held accountable. Because if you're not hearing what I'm saying when I'm trying to share my story, then I'm certainly not going to make any efforts to try and hold you accountable. So I think I love this this 3-step process, and understanding that no, they're not necessarily in the right. Things are not always going to happen in this exact order. But there is a process, and again, the discomfort around all of this. Who wants to admit they're wrong, right? About anything, regardless of an uncomfortable situation, but who wants to just be in a space where they're, okay, tell me what I did wrong? That's not something that we really want to do in general. So especially in situations where it's an uncomfortable conversation like race and racism, it's important to understand that you have to be sensitive and you have to be vulnerable. You have to lean into the discomfort and understand that if you've built an authentic relationship with this person, that they will do their best to communicate with you. But when they do what you ask them to do in terms of holding you accountable, you have to receive it. You have to listen, and then you have to take it in. And, being defensive or argumentative, that doesn't help. And typically people will not want to help hold you accountable if you're not going to be receptive to their comments.
Yes.
And you have to have trust. You have to have that trust factor there.
Most definitely. And
Dawn,
sorry, go ahead, Craig.
I'm sorry. Dawn had shared that the one word that I think is really, really big, and that's vulnerability. And that, being as vulnerable as you can when you've messed up or when you've hurt somebody and you're wounded, but the other person was wounded first, and so really being open to the vulnerability piece, and for the sake of learning and for the sake of doing better, and recognizing that probably the biggest reality is we're dealing with people.
Yeah.
And we're going to make mistakes. We're going to constantly make mistakes and have errors. But again, how do you step from and past and beyond that with your next actions and your next thoughts after that mistake has occurred?
And you know what? You guys trusted me not to make any mistakes, and I've been trying to watch the time, and I've just realized that we've been talking for a good 50 minutes now, and we've had some really great conversation. Will you guys will you be on Zoom again and do another show? Because I think that there's a lot
Absolutely.
more that we can talk about.
Sure.
All right.
You know us, Amy. Of course we will.
I know. I don't have to twist your arm. But thank you so much for making the time to be with us here today to talk about these uncomfortable conversations. And we'll have you guys back, and we'll do some more uncomfortable conversations on different topics. Because again, there's so much that we can learn from each other, and hopefully we've provided a little bit of insight for the people who are watching this show today to learn a little bit more about how to flip the script. So we're going to close it up because, I could go on forever. I could ramble, but I am going to get in trouble if I don't cut it off pretty soon. All right. So you're listening to the Extension Hour, 104.5, 106.1, worldwide on irlonestar.com, on YouTube. Join us again. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Today's show was recorded and broadcasted live on irlonestar.com, Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1, and all rights and ownership are reserved to Lone Star Community Radio. For more information regarding this program and Lone Star Community Radio, visit us online at irlonestar.com. Lone Star Community Radio is Montgomery County's community radio station, serving the community with local programming on TV, radio, and online. If you enjoyed today's program, please support us by sponsorship or starting your own show. Contact us today by phone or text at 936-666-1084 or email the station at lscrstudios@gmail.com.